Welcome back to this next segment here, where we're going to be talking to Adam Kwapiński. Thank you, Adam, for joining me today. How are you doing?
Quite well. Hello, everybody. Hi, Rainer.
If you've looked at the event schedule and so forth and such, the original plan was to also have David Turci with us, but he was not feeling well this morning. So we wish him the best, and we'll look forward to talking to him some other time. But Adam, I'm grateful that you're here with me today. Um, we 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 have some fun games to talk about, right? Um, the most recent game of yours that was released with us was, of course, Origins First Builders. It's a game that a lot of people were excited about. People have talked about it. It ended up, because of logistics, of course, releasing later in the year that we had originally planned, but now it's out and available for people. People are excited to get it to the table. Um, so I just want to ask a question to you, um, as a designer of a game, whether this be a game like Origins or games that you have with other publishers and so forth. What's that journey like for you? Because of course, for you, that journey starts way sooner, because you're
Yeah,
designing the game, then eventually it gets to a publisher, then there's a long process of development and artwork and everything, and then it doesn't get into the hands of gamers for sometimes 2 years or so. What's that journey like for you?
yeah. It's always quite funny because when somebody asks me about recent games, it's always totally different perspective for a designer side because. My recent games I'm working on now are totally different than the games people are playing now because, as you said, the time from my perspective is very different because my work on Origins and I think like 18 months ago, or maybe even 2 years ago, something like this. And I have a chance to play the Origins last month after the release with the final product, and it was fun. It was fun playing that game after the break, and I really enjoy it. And this is very very important experience because when you work on the game, it is exhausting playing the game over and over again with lots of change. It is also funny when people ask me some question about rules because they have the game already. Sometimes designer don't get his own copy yet because customers are more important, and this is obvious. So I really have to check in the rule book what is the final rule because there was many little changes in the development process, and I don't want to give somebody some old rules that was changed in the development process. So sometimes I just have to say, okay, can you send me a picture from the rule book because I don't have my own rule book yet, and
Right.
I don't want to mislead you. And of course, when I see the rule, the interpretation is obvious for me because I can remember. Okay, I know why this is what this mean and why we end up with this rule. I remember the whole process, but playing the game for the first time after releasing it, it's important. And with the Euro games like Origins, I think it's easier for designer to enjoy the game. Of course, if we play the game with people who know the game, because when you show the game to the new people and you know that game very well, it's hard to not take the full advantage of knowing all the strategy stuff. And I cannot play just not thinking about winning, and I'm not very good on the fairs or other events to showing my own games, because people don't like losing when they play new games. So mostly I don't show my own games on shows and events, because nobody wants to buy a game when they lose poorly the first game they play.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting that you mention rules and such, because for me, and I can very much relate to that, right? Because of course I'm involved in the development process, and I help with either to a certain extent writing the rules or at least editing them. And then often I do demos with our media partners, and then at conventions with people and everything. And I have to tell you, especially the demos that I do with reviewers and media partners and so forth, they end up being my guinea pigs a little bit, because I don't know yet how to teach the game, and I have to look up in the rule book, because I don't always remember. Okay, what was the final rule that we settled on? What was this? Or it's been a while, right, since we worked on it. And same thing, people will start asking questions after a game is released. They'll ask a question on Board Game Geek, and sometimes I'm like, I know why you're asking this. I don't remember the answer. I need to go look up in the rule book or whatever, because again, you're working on something else. You've taken your mind off of that for a while. It's funny, speaking of David Turtsey, so sometimes when he has someone has asked a question on BGG, so sometimes he will say, well, this is what I remember from when we were working on it, but don't quote me on the rule. Ask Rainer. He'll tell you what the official rule is supposed to be, because again, there can be small changes. Often, of course, you have been involved in that process, so you know what the rule was. But again, it's been so long for you, and you remember all the rules prior to that, right? Those are the ones during the design process that you really worked on over and over. So
and what is important, the game during the designing process, when you create a game, it starts to you creating something that is separate from you. During the process, more and more, it's something different. It's separate being, you can tell, and it is important in the end when the game is released. It's not important what the designer was thinking, what he was in his mind about some rules or something like this, because at that time it's not important anymore. it's important what's in the rule book, what's the rule book says. And when somebody asks me, okay, but what was your plan? My plan is not important anymore. When the game is released, it's separate from me, and what's in the rule book, it's important. Even if what I have in my mind at the beginning was something different. So yeah, I have to stick to the rules like any other player. I'm just in the end, I'm just another player playing my own game, nothing else.
Right. Well, and it's interesting too because I know in the development process of different games, and this doesn't happen with every game or so, but when it happens, there are times when a rule gets some aspect of the game gets dropped or eliminated completely, not because it's a bad rule, not because but because it just takes up space. It's some aspect that it doesn't improve the game. Taking it out does not make it worse, but taking it out or changing it simplifies it for people that need to learn it, right? And that happens sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, sometimes, especially those things, they were there for a reason. Obviously, there's a reason why you put it in there. But like you're saying, and I think that's the healthy approach to take to it as well. That it's the final version that is out, the one that people are playing. That's the one that you want them to enjoy as well. Someone was asking in the chat, and yes, please put questions in the chat, and I'm monitoring that, so we will ask those. But Johan was asking, so this is if you're thinking about the games that you have either designed on your own or co-designed with someone else. First part of the question is, which one of those is the one that you're the most proud of?
Hard one. It's like asking a parent which kid you love most. Of course, it's easier because probably games will not hear me and never listen to that. Of course, Nemesis is very important for me because the time it takes to create that game. I start creating Nemesis. Now it's like 9 years ago. So and it takes whole 6 years to the moment when the Kickstarter starts for the first core box. So this was very important project for me. But really, when I think about games I design or co-design, I always try to find in each game one mechanism or one problem I try to solve in different way. So even if the game, when I look at it now, I don't think that the game is very good or great nowadays, and I have a lot of games that I don't think now they are very good. But even in those games, I can find something that I'm really proud of. Sometimes it's very little thing, like I don't know. There was a historical game called First to Fight, and when you create historical game, it's always difficult to make a game that is historical accurate, but still, you have to give players a lot of decisions and make the game interesting. But in this game, it was very important that specific events, because the game was about Second World War, will take place in the correct time. We don't want to make some battles in the different time or place. So this was very, very hard to figure it out. And this one mechanism in this game, the mechanism of time track connected with missions or events in this game is one thing that I'm still proud of, even if the game, when I look at it, is for now, I think it's too long. For example, for what you get from it, it should be shorter, and it needs some development when I think about that game. So mostly in each game, I can find something, even something small, but something that I'm really proud of.
And I think it's important to, and you touched on that when you were talking about the rules as well. Obviously, each game, it becomes its own. Once it's released, that's a special moment, because now it's a product. It's out there for people to enjoy. But then it's also for you, the game holds a different meaning, because every game that you have designed and worked on, whether or not that game was actually released or not, that's part of your journey as a designer, and you learn things, you change things, certain things that may have been important at one point change in importance, or things that you didn't care so much at one point in designing become more important as time goes on. So it's and I understand what you're saying, that it's difficult for that reason, right? It's not just, well, which game is objectively the best, or which one is the one that has been the most successful, because the journey for each game is an important part of your journey as a person and a designer as well. So Johan had a second part to this question.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about your games, then some of the ones that you think are that hold a special place in your heart for a different for whatever reason. What if those games were designed by someone else? Do you think you'd still enjoy those games? Would you want to own those games?
Some of them, yes. It depends, because I have very weird taste when we talk about games, and really wide taste, because I'm not. I cannot say that I'm Euro players or Ameritrash player or something like this, because for me, game is a game, and if the game is good in what is trying to do, it's enough for me. So my favorite games are on the one hand, I can say that Feast of Odin is one of my favorite, but I also love, for example, Peach Car. I also love Galaxy Tracker, and of course Through the Ages. And those are games that I will play always. And I can't say that one is better than other. They are all great games, and this is because they do very well what they want to do, and those are very good designs. So Some of my games, yes, I probably will have on my shelf if someone else will design them. And for example, Nemesis, probably yes, this will be one of that game. Probably Dark Ages also. Origins, yes, because I love dice placement games and that kind of stuff. Also Heroes, the weird game with real-time mechanism, because this is kind of unique game and there are not many games like this, and I was really inspired to make this by Galaxy Tracker. So yeah, those are my first picks when I think about that question.
Right. Yeah, and I think I feel the same way from a publisher point of view, right? There are certainly some games that we have published that I would absolutely own, even if they were by some other publisher I hadn't worked on them. But I also know that there are some of those games that I like them because I know them so well, or they hold a special place in my heart for whatever reason. I don't know honestly how many of them that I would or would not own or play otherwise. But yeah. Kylo Ren is saying that. So first of all, saying that your games have they both have a lot of depth, but they're also elegant and streamlined in how they play. So the question is, how can you combine that by having both complexity and depth in as far as the experience goes, but without the game being too complicated to play or too disorganized or chaotic to play?
Thanks for that. It's really important for me because this is one thing I try to achieve in a lot of my design. Not always, because sometimes there are more important things for the game. Like, for example, when I create Nemesis, the team was priority, so I have to go make some compromise about fiddleness and some small rules in that game, because for the team, it was better to have a little more rules, give players some feelings that they, for example, can close and open doors just to feel the team more. And it, of course, needs additional rule in the rule book, how to close, how to open the doors. But this was the reason. But mostly when I create games, I always think about if I have one rule in a game, one mechanism, maybe not rule, one mechanism, I try to not add another ones. I try to focus on the core mechanism, like in Origins. Origins have two main mechanism, both connected with the dice, and one is putting the dice on the encounter sides and taking an action from that. And the second one is building your city and closing your districts. Yeah, this was the core mechanism of the game. This is how it started. And really, it starts from the octagonal shapes. And when I put 4 shapes before me, I see that I have square between them. I put a dice there, and I think, oh, okay, it looks nice. Maybe we can do something with that. But I try to make core mechanism and then explore it to the maximum, not adding another one, because of course I always when we create a game, we always can put a lot of new mechanism to that, and sometimes there are some common mechanism, as I like to name them, that will always work in mostly any game. We can add some special cards, we can add some special abilities, some progress, tableau building, and so on and so on. This will always, or I don't know, secret goals, something like this. This will always works in any games. Mostly, this will be always give some fun for players, because players like to have some special abilities, like to play some special cards and things like this. But I don't think that this is very good approach, and this is very good direction for games, because we can lose what we have special in our games. We have added so many additional mechanisms that people will not see the main mechanism, the interesting part of our game, because that additional mechanisms are in any game mostly, and can be added to any game. And I think, for example, video games have nowadays mostly the same problem, maybe even more than board games, because in board games we have some restriction, because if you want to add something to the board game, you have produce it. It have material form, so it will raise the cost. So we have to stay minimalistic in more strict way than AAA's computer games. And in video games, for example, maybe not any, but many games nowadays have crafting, have some RPG mechanism in each game. You will collecting some stuff in the world. In each game, you will have some kind of experience point for your character. You will have some statistic, and so on and so on. And you are playing Witcher, and the Witcher will taking flowers, walking around the world, and I don't know why. I love the game, of course, but I have no idea why the Witcher is collecting flowers around this. This is not unique. This is just giving players something that will work in any game. And I'm trying to avoid that, creating board games, and focus on what is different, what is the core mechanism, what is interesting in that game, and not adding some additional mechanism that make only noise sometimes.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of like, I was thinking as you were talking about this, it's kind of like if you're looking at a cake, for example. You eat the cake because of the flavor of the cake itself. But if you have too much decoration and frosting and stuff, it becomes overwhelming, and you never get through to the real reason why you're having a piece of cake. It becomes a distraction instead. And I think that's a good way of looking at it, that all of those other things that you could add to any game, even though they're exciting, players like asymmetrical player powers, they love objectives, they like a lot of those things. But if there's not a good foundation first, well, those things alone, you can't make a good game that is just based on asymmetrical player powers and objectives. There's no foundation for it to stand on. So having that core foundation that needs to be interesting, then it's easier to for the and it's also easier for to explain to players. Okay, what does this game do? What is this game? Because every game needs to know what it's trying to achieve. Every game is designed to do something. You were talking about Nemesis, for example. That was designed to be a thematic experience. And when you play that game, you feel that okay, well, this is one of the core elements of the game is to make it thematic. You feel the dread of what's going to happen next. You feel that the game is cheating, it's treating you unfairly, and you know that that's because there are aliens on board. And you're getting desperate and be like, oh, well, I really want to do this one thing, but I need to do this other thing because otherwise we're gonna die. And that's because the game, it delivers on what it's meant to do. There are unfortunately games that come out every year that you look at it and you're saying, oh, okay, well, this I can tell from the description or whatever. Here's what the game is telling me that it's trying to do. And then you play it, and it doesn't really deliver on that. It delivers on a lot of other things. Sometimes it has great options for character selection. Oh, this one seems really cool. Oh, this is a cool one. And in the end, I don't care because whatever I do in the game is not exciting, right? And it's a really good point that you bring up. Johan was asking another question here, and I have one point of view from the publisher side of thing, but I'm going to let you answer this question first.
Okay.
And this is basically you as a designer, when you when a game has been picked up by a publisher and it's in the development process, how much leverage do you have when it comes to either preventing changes from being made to the game or having the input on what changes can be offered? Are there things that you can veto and say, okay, well, you can change this thing, but that one thing cannot be touched? What's your take on that?
I have some very, very simple rule I try to stick, and my cooperation with publishers are mostly like this, and it works like that. If we talk about anything that doesn't touch the mechanism of the game, so artwork, visual style, and so on, in most games, because of course there are some games like, for example, Nemesis, when I don't want to change the idea and I want the game to be what it's meant to be. But in other designs, when the theme is not so important for me, I totally left it to the publisher, because this is the stuff the publisher know much better than me. And I was a publisher for a short time. I know I'm not good at it, and just let it to the professionals. And of course, if someone asks me, do you like this artwork, I will tell, but only like, I think it's okay or not okay, but do what you think, because I'm not specialist on that field. But when we talk about mechanism, it works, in my opinion, on a different way. And of course, in development process, if publisher want to make any big changes, and I'm not talking about some balancing stuff, about some moving the numbers or something like this, because this is This is small, or as I like to name it, content changes, because if someone wants to change one card on one number, it's just a content, not the mechanism or how something works. If the changes, if a publisher want to change something bigger, I have to agree on that. I'm open to proposition, but I have to know why, and I have to see arguments about it, and we can talk. But the final decision in that is on my side, because it's in the end it's my name and the co-designer on the box, so it should be, in my opinion, on my side. About balancing stuff, mostly when we talk about publishers like you or Awaken Realms, or just publishers with I'm works longer time, and I know they are good in what they're doing. There are a lot of trust, and I don't have to check any number or something like this. But I'm a designer who try to be in the development process, not give the prototype and go to another game and do nothing. I always ready to work with development team, and also I like to help in development of other games. So we, as you know, we also playing our other prototypes. So we just talk, but in the balancing stuff there is a lot of trust, and that kind of changes are for me are no problem. Mostly I check the final files, and only if I see something really weird, I ask, okay, why something like this? What happened with that?
Right. Yeah, and I think I mean, part of it is, of course, every designer is different. Some like to be involved. Some are good at being involved. Other designers, they don't want to be involved much at all, and it depends greatly on the game and such. It also depends, like you said, also on the publisher, right? Do they have the experience? If it's a new publisher versus an established one, have they published these kinds of games before? And it's funny because one of the things that when if it's someone who's an aspiring designer, I always try to, as a general rule, I try to say, okay, in general, don't get your hopes up. Assume that once you basically make the game as good as you can, and then hand it off to the publisher and hope for the best. That's the advice that I give to aspiring designers, because it's best to go in with that expectation. Now, what I would give advice to a new publisher is basically work closely with the designer, because they know the game. They're the ones that have worked on this. They pour their soul into this. They want the game to be the best they can. And then the reality is that you meet somewhere in the middle, right? There are certain things, as long as you have a good relationship between the designer and the publisher, you talk about things. There are certain things that, like you said, it doesn't matter in some cases if it's a 3 or a 4. That has nothing to impact the game. That's something that comes out of playtesting or something. It doesn't matter if something is certain. So yeah, sometimes theme won't impact it, but other times it will. And it's important that there is everyone needs to recognize that there is a symbiotic relationship. The designer has designed the very best game they want it to be, and the publisher wants to publish the very best game that it can be. And if at any point that doesn't match up, well, then that's usually because it's not the best fit. It can be a great game, but it's not the great game for that publisher or something. And usually that just means that the publisher ends up not picking it up or not signing it or anything. But it's a great question, and it's one of those things that I think people wonder about and say, well, what happens with that? But the reality is that it's because there have been games that we have evaluated from some designer, and it's a great game in there. But then we look at it and we're saying, well, for that game to be a game that we want to publish, there would be too many changes, and that would change the core of the game, and we don't want to do that, so we just turn it down. Not because it's a bad game, but because it would go through too many changes in the development process, and then we would rather have it find a great fit with another publisher, right?
And it's very, very good and very fair because, if you have to change core of the game, why don't somebody just design new game?
Right.
Because
Yep. No, and it's but it's a good question. I think to like it makes sense to ask that question, right? But the reality is that the core changes unless something big comes out in playtesting, like something major that comes up, or there is some really good reason for it. Otherwise, it's rare, at least from our perspective, that we want to, and it would be extremely rare to then not work with the designer on it. Like we obviously work with different designers, and we always, if there's something that is a big, or even not a big thing, but it's something that at all is significant for the game, we're considering having one fewer resource in the game, or we're considering something that is streamlining it or so. The best thing is for everyone, because you want everyone to be happy with the end product for the same reason, right? You want the designer to be happy, the publisher wants to be happy, and usually you get a good result when you work together closely on those things. So here is this is a question from John, and this may or may not have happened to you, but this is a question about basically some kind of change in a mechanism that has there been, first of all, a time that a publisher suggested something that you feel was a significant change to the game, and that you felt made the game better?
Yes, I think, of course, it was, and more than that, it was that I was firstly, couple of times, I was firstly defensive about that change, and I say no, it's hard no from me, and after, for example, couple of days, I think about it and say, okay, I think your idea was good. Sometimes what was funny, I think that the idea was good for totally different reason that the publisher bring that idea, because I find the reason how it improved the game in different areas, but yeah, it happened to me a couple of times. For example, it was in Nemesis, and it happens not even not from publishers. It sometimes happened from community. When people were testing the game, there was a problem with number of actions in round, because in the Kickstarter time, there was playing whole round to the. You was playing all the 5 cards you have, or all cards you want. You pass, and there was next player, next player, next player, and it brings downtime, especially in the 4 or 5 players games. And people don't like it. Downtime is always a bad thing in a game. And somebody said, "Oh, so maybe only 2 cards." And I said, "Okay, we were checking 1 card, and it was true. I start with 1 card years ago, and it was a disaster, totally disaster. The game was broken because people can't do enough in the turn, so the turn can't. You can't do anything important in your turn, and you can't do anything that change the game. And it was important in a semi-cooperative game. And at first I was very defensive to that, because I think, okay, 1 card wasn't working, so I know why we are in the 5 card. I know the downtime problem, but no. And I tried the 2 card game, just even don't know why, but just say, okay, why not? And it works. It works greatly, and I was just surprised. And it stays. Now the game is much better than without that idea. And I probably will never check that without that suggestion from community this time.
Yeah, and I think part of that is the fact that you're so involved in the design and you know it so well, it's hard to look at it with fresh eyes, right? Which is also why every time that we sign a design, we know that from the designer's perspective, this game is done, it's finished, it just needs art and it's ready to be published, right? That's often the which is good. It's good to say, hey, look, this is a finished product, and then it goes through the development, and there are some minor changes and tweaks, and then we feel as the publisher, like, oh man, now this game, which was already great when we received it, a few minor things that we saw with fresh eyes, they have been ironed out. Oh, it's ready to be published. And then we take it to playtesters, and now they play it hundreds or thousands of times. And then little things come out where it's like, oh yeah, this, oh, you're right. Every step of the way, there's room for a little improvement, and sometimes it's a surprising thing. Someone suggests something and it works, and other times it's a small improvement. Sometimes it's going back to something that you've done previously. Sometimes we have one of the surprising things for us is sometimes that you feel that a game needs something. You're playing it and you say, okay, well this is missing something, and sometimes that missing thing is taking away something. It's not adding something, it's taking away something. You get 1 fewer turn, you get 1 fewer action, 1 fewer card or whatever, and other times it's adding something in. And that happens for us. We get surprised by the feedback from playtesters, and so forth. So
yeah. But what you said about the designer who thinks that the game is finished, I think, and I wrote it once. There is no such thing as finished games. Never. Game is never finished. There is only release date, and it's not means that the game is finished. You can work on the game to the infinity, truly, and this is why we have second and third edition and so on, even with the small improvement. And even if we talk about really, really great games like Through the Ages, for example, if Vlada can improve that game, it means that we can improve any game at any time. So I think this is very important, especially for new designers, that never think that your game is finished. And if you go to the publisher with that attitude, you are doomed at the start.
And at the same time, the opposite is also true. Don't try to work on it until it's perfect, because you will never get to the point where the game is perfect.
Of course, this is the second part of the line, but I think this is on the publisher side. The publisher have to take the game from the designer and said, okay, stop now, don't do this.
But it's
we
also
have to publish.
It's also something that can, especially for a new designer, that can hold someone back, and they work on it and may have worked on it for a long time and feel like, you know what, this one is not this I can't figure this out. Well, sometimes what that needs, it needs a publisher. Sometimes the game because we accept designs in various stages, and there are some that are basically final when we get them. And then there are other games that need more work, but there is a gem in there, and it's just a matter of polishing it, right? And it's finding that and not being afraid of either letting go of something and saying, okay, well, I'm done. I've done everything that I can. Now let's give it put it in the hands of a publisher or so. Or, for that matter, if there is a problem, to keep working on it, because everything, like you said, everything can be improved. If something isn't perfect, is it fun? Do people enjoy it? That's the important part. All right, here's a question that I think you have received in the past, or it's a common question, especially for designers and so forth. So the question is, you have complete freedom, 100%, to work with any designer. Who would you work with?
Vlada Kwapiński.
I will 100% accept that answer. Yeah,
so that was fast one and easy one for me, because really this is the guy I always admire his works, and no idea how in one mind that many good games with different mechanisms, different styles can be created. So
yeah, I mean, you look at again the variety of games. Like I have a game, and we have played this one, or at least I think you and I have played this one together, that I don't think most people haven't heard of it or know that it's one of his games. And for sure, if you sat down and played it, people would not think that it's one of his games, which is Travel Blog. Again, it's a great game. It doesn't, like, you can't compare it with other ones. You have to let it stand on its own. But again, yeah, that variety of designs and things, it's really remarkable. So here's another question. So now this goes into you were talking about, you like a wide variety of games, right? You like different types of games, and I would expand on that as well, that just because you like a certain genre does not mean that you like all the games in that genre. But you like the variety of things. And then you're looking at us as a publisher. Of course, as individuals, we also like a variety of things. In fact, there is overlap, obviously, between us as individuals within the company of games that we like. But we also have our outliers, where there are some of us that like different weights of games. Some of us like party games, some of us do not like party games, and so forth. But as a publisher, we have focused on a certain narrower niche of basically medium heavy Euro games, and especially designers that fit that, including you. What about so now and this is a question for both of us, right? Where do you see, because there's both overlap in things that we like, the games that you design, but you've also designed games that we wouldn't have published because they are not a fit for the types of games. So the question is really then, well, what's, if we explore and just think freely about the future, right? Do you think that there are games that you would design that are normally a little bit outside of what we would publish that you think would be a good fit for us, and vice versa? I'll let you answer that first, and then I'll.
Interesting question.
Because
Really?
the games that we have released by you are, of course, ones that still fit well within. Like, look at Origins, for example. That game fits well with things. You could say Dark Ages. There's certainly differences compared to the Euro games, but there's still, when you look at the mechanisms and you're playing the game, there's still the DNA in there that overlaps well. So.
Yeah, but when we talk about, for example, Dark Ages, and before that, of course, it was before you joined with the. It was before Board&Dice and NSK and join. I have In Between that was published with old Board&Dice. There will be Terracotta Army from me and Przemek. And when I think about those games, I think all of them are little, take step aside what you normally publish. When we talk about Terracotta Army, we have plenty of miniatures there, and this is not exactly what you are doing in most of your games. Of course, there is Euro mechanism, and it's very very Euro game, and it have T title. So again, it fits your title. Dark Ages also have. It's very different than most of your games, and I created with Andre, so it's from your company in its core, and I don't know. I think it's. I never think about games thinking about publisher. It's not when I think about new game, when I have an idea, I don't think okay, so what will fit or not fit to the specific publisher now. And now I know that it will be great to publish something new with that publisher. So what I can design to them, I cannot think like this. This is business style thinking, and I'm not good at it. But I think you will see a lot of different games from me, and it will just depends how far you will want to go from your core. And I think you are getting more and more steps aside. Sometimes you will, of course, still will you will have still your main line, but as I know about some new games you will release, there are some games that are a little different than only Euro.
Yeah, and I think from our perspective, right, the real answer that determines whether or not we pick up a certain design is, can we do that design justice? Because we look at designs that, for whatever reason, we don't like. Most of the games that we see, we'd end up not picking them up, right? And it's usually not because they're bad games. It's just because either we don't know how to publish that type of game, we don't know how to develop it, or it requires certain skills. Because if one thing that we know that we can do, we know that we can make medium heavy Euro games, and we will, no matter what, we will approach a design with some of that experience in the back of our minds as well, right? Because those are games that that's the core of what we do, and that's the core mechanisms that we work with. But there's a lot of room outside of that, right? You look at a game like Dark Ages, for example, that you could look at it from a strict point of view of saying, okay, well, that is nothing like the games that we publish, and you would be right. But you can also look at that same game, and you'll find things in there that you're saying, oh, well, this part is exactly that something that fits our core. And that's usually because it's not black and white, right? This is not, there's not always a simple answer to those things. It's a matter of, is this going to be a good fit between the designer, the game, and the publisher? Even some examples from other games that are a core part of our line. A lot of people talk about the T line of games, right? And they say, okay, well, this is what we do. Yeah, but then you look at Escape Tales. Escape Tales is nothing like Teotihuacan. They're not sold on the same shelf. They don't attract generally the same stores that will sell them, and they're both games that are part of our core business, right? So just because there are differences and things look different, there are games that have miniatures, or there are other games that have wooden pieces or whatever. That's the dressing on top of it. That doesn't mean that it's something is not gonna. It's more a matter of, can we give that game and that design the best chance that it has to be as good as it can be, and is that a good relationship between us and the designer? But you're right. Some of the things that are coming down I mean, we've already had examples both with you and with other designers as well that do go outside of what I think most people would describe as our core, and that's definitely going to continue if we're looking at things that we haven't talked about yet. So yeah. Now here is and this is both a question from a design point of view, and that's basically when it comes to games that you either design completely on your own, or that you have a co-designer. Do you usually work on the solo modes for those games, or is that generally someone who's more focused on that? Like, for example, David has worked on some of the solo things for your games, and he's one of the people that is known for specifically doing that for games that he's not designed originally himself.
Truly, mostly I don't work on solo mode if the solo mode is separate of the game, because of course there are games where the solo mode is integral part of the experience, and it didn't take making another game, because what David really makes for those games is another set of rules, and it makes different game with the same mechanism, but it's really different game. So I'm not very good at it. Of course, I make some solo games or cooperative game. In Nemesis, you can play solo. I make also Frostpunk, which is fully cooperative game, and you can play it solo. So this is the examples, but really the only solo mode I make for my game was in the Lords of Hellas, and this was the short campaign solo mode, which was totally different than the normal game. And most people didn't like that style of solo mode. So, for example, with the Lords of Ragnarok, David is making the solo mode because people love what he's making, and it's better for everybody doing this that way. I'm not also a solo player. Mostly, there are some games that I love play solo, but it's very rare. Yeah, he's much better in this, and I think I like to focus on making new games, and I love competition. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting too because, like you said, David's solo modes, which is one of the reasons why we like working with him, is the fact that and of course he has a great team with him as well. John, in fact, is one of them. Nick Shaw and others. I mean, there's a great team of both designers, playtesters, and others involved in it. But what makes those solo modes so unique is that as a player, I can still play the same game. I can still play as if I'm playing against another human opponent. But the game cheats. The game does not play fair. It doesn't play by the same rules. Me and the solo AI are not playing the same game, right? But it works. And yeah. Thank you, by the way, Panda, for that raid. Welcome everyone who is here. We are talking with Adam Kwapiński, who is a wonderful designer, has designed both a lot of games for us, but of course has a wide catalog of games with other publishers. And that's one of the things actually that comes up often. People look at when your games are come up in a discussion, because there are obviously some designers that they're known for making the same type of game over and over and over. You are one of those designers that is recognized and appreciated for the differences in those games. There's still like someone was saying earlier, there's that core of having something clever in the game without having that be overbearing, that you can discover something new. Whereas other designers, they take something that is, and they keep the core, and then they tweak a few things around it, right? What's your approach to that? Because of course there's a wide variety of different types of games that you design and work on. So what's your inspiration when you get started on a new game? Do you go for a cool mechanism that you discovered, or do you does it come from other games where you're saying, you know what, when I was working on that other game, I thought of this thing and I wanted to put that in something in the future? Or what's the process there for you?
It depends. It really is very different for each game. There's always some main idea behind the game, but it can be very, very different for each game. It can be team, it can be one mechanism, one small clever thing. It can be, for example, one kind of emotion on, for example, when I create Heroes, the game with real-time aspect, I was thinking about getting real-time strategy on table, but with the real-time, not the real-time strategy when you just have turns and try to collect resource and build something, because this is just strategy, not real-time strategy. So I try to get those emotions, and I try to think, okay, how can I make board game as emotional as that kind of emotion like people get from playing StarCraft, for example. When you have to, of course, you have strategy, but you also have really quick using your mouse on the screen. So it can be anything. Sometimes the inspiration came from other games. It came from a book I read, from a music I listen, or I don't know, from a fancy thing I find. Sometimes you can go to the tool store and find something weird and think, okay, maybe that shape can be used somehow in a board game. So there's no one rule, but I always try to have the main idea for a game and keep that idea during the whole process. And everything what I make to that game, I try to remember about that idea and ask myself, okay, is this help to bring that idea to life or not? If not, maybe I don't need that. Maybe this game don't need another thing if it's not helping that idea. And this is how it works. But where's the source of inspiration? No idea, really.
It's interesting you were talking about the experience and sometimes the emotion that is connected to, and that's true whether we're talking about a thematic experience like in Nemesis or in a game like Origins. I remember, especially one of the times that I was demoing Origins at PAX Unplugged in December, and I remember clearly because these are memorable experiences. We sat down and I was teaching to two good friends the game, and they knew about the game. They were excited to play it because they'd heard things and such, but they had not had a chance to sit down and play it yet. And as I was going through and explaining the rules, and they started to see how everything was fitting together, because like you were talking about, yes, there are certain core mechanisms, but there are also a few things that happen surrounding those mechanisms, right? There are a few things that take place in the game, and knowing when to, as a player, when to involve those aspects into your overall strategy will have a big outcome on the game, even if you're still sending your workers to the different encounter sites, and even if you're building your city. But the other decisions, the side decisions that they will support your overall strategy. And it was so wonderful to see the joy on their faces when they realized how some of these things that normally wouldn't necessarily be that exciting, but how there were little things on the side of you. Oh, if I do this, for example, even something that even though it's a big part of the game, but just the choice of the colors, for example, the
Mm.
consistent use of the colors in the game. Yes, there are 5 colors of encounter sites. There are 5 colors of buildings, 5 colors of dice, 5 colors of tower discs. But it's not until you sit down and play the game that you really realize what those colors mean and how those colors mean different things depending on how they're being used. The colors mean something different on the encounter sites. They mean different when you're building your city and so forth. And it's clear that as a designer, when you get experiences from things, or when you're sitting and working on it, that's whether you're doing that on purpose or not, that you're building an experience for the players, whether they are playing a thematic game like Nemesis or a more Euro game like Origins, right? That the experiences that people have along the way, they have your touch on them because that means something for you when you're designing the games.
Yeah, it's about exploring what I was talking about exploring the core mechanism. When you talk about color of a die, it's like, you have that value. It's one of the values you have, and I know I have that thing. So I want to use it as much as I can. So the color of anything will be used in any part of the game, in different ways, of course, as you said. And yes, when players start playing, they will see that, okay, so the same thing means different. They will explore the game. And it's like going the same way, playing the game, exploring the game, that I was going through the designing process when I was figuring out how it will work. This is, I think, this is that kind of experience people can get sometimes when they play a game, and yeah, it can be funny for some people to go through the same path.
Yeah, and especially when in a game like Origins, it's used as a almost to the level that people would be used to having like resources. You use the color of the dice and of the buildings as something that I have to think about as carefully, where in other games that might stop at the resources that I'm collecting. Okay, do I need to collect more stone or wood? I mean, you have resources as well in Origins, but it's refreshing to have something else that also ties in and that I can build a strategy around, and I use that resource. I don't just place a worker. I need a blue worker. I specifically need a blue worker because I need to be able to trigger this building, or I need that bonus for the encounter site or whatever it is. It gives you another level of experiencing the game with in a way that it's also not distracting, right? It gives you more experience with the foundation that you have laid as a designer for it. Well, Adam, it has been a real pleasure. It's always a pleasure to talk to you and explore your mind. You always have great insight when it comes to not just the games, of course, that you have worked on, but other designs and games in general. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to people that have been here
Always happy to talk to
asking
you.
questions and so forth. For people that are interested in knowing what's coming next from you, what should they be looking for? If it's something that you can talk about, what's the next project coming from you?
Oh, it's always tricky question. I never know what I can tell and what I can't. Of course, Terracotta Army this year. Of course, Lords of Ragnarok. Nemesis Lockdown is already in hands of backers, and Knockdown probably should be in couple of months. A month. The small game from Awakened Realms Light. Now I'm working on 5-6 titles. The Frostpunk is printing like now, so it should be in couple of months also in hands of backers. But things that I'm working on now, I'm afraid I cannot talk because all the weird agreements, NDAs, and all the stuff. So some publishers can be very very mad at me. You just have to wait, and probably they will announce something, and after that I can speak.
I think the exciting thing is that there are both things that have either just come out, that are soon coming out, or that are coming out in a while, plus additional things that you're working on that we don't know yet and that will be announced, whether that be with us or with other publishers and so forth. So the exciting thing is that there are things. There's no end to the inspiration and the creativity there yet. So that's good news.
Yeah, for now, still working. So.
Well, that's excellent. Again, thank you, Adam. It was great having you on here. And thanks to everyone as well that have been here watching. We're going to take a quick break, and we will be back in a little bit with a panel where we're talking about the artwork for Nightmare Cathedral, the game that uses the artwork from Zdzisław Beksiński. So stay tuned for that, and thanks again, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.